What is your stance on gender ideology?
Well, it's a Marxist tool to break down all moral restraints in a society. And you notice at the end of the alphabet people, there's this plus sign. And that means anything you want it to be, including identifying as a cat and needing a litter box in a elementary school or whatever. This is absolute madness, and it's terrible violation of the criminal code of sexualization of children. It has to be stopped, and it has to be stopped in a very punitive way. It needs to be recriminalized. Anybody doing this to a young child needs to be in prison.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our show. This time, my guest, Mr. Larry Heder, he's running for the party CHP, and I believe that's Christian Heritage Party.
It is Christian Heritage Party Canada.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, before we start into this by-election, I would like to congratulate you on your recent victory 2 months ago when you caused the Conservative candidate in Alberta's elections to lose, Taylor Shandro, I'm referring to.
Yes, he was Minister of Health on the lockdowns for the pandemic, and he was also Minister of Justice that was over the prosecutors who pressed charges against various pastors in the city.
I believe you're happy about the results then.
I'm happy, yeah. You don't joy over the loss of somebody's political career, but I think it was a necessary step in the purging of the UCP and the government.
I see. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I would like to give you the opportunity to present your ideas, your position on things, and what would you do if you were to go to Ottawa. But before that, if you could please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Larry Heder. This is my 13th run, and 13 is a good number for me rather than a bad. I was saved on a Friday the 13th, so I kind of ruined the devil's party. But we have a platform called Life, Family, and Freedom in our brochure here. And we stand up for the unborn, for the helpless, for those who are vulnerable to euthanasia, the so-called medical assistance in dying program. We are, of course, for family and against any grooming of children, as we see in the Sound of Freedom movie that's burst into the theaters. This is a very appropriate time to consider what is being allowed to go on in our Canada and the U.S. in particular in regards to child trafficking. Then we have freedom based on Christian law that was in the English common law, in the Magna Carta, in all of the various Blackstone's commentaries on law. We're all infused with Ten Commandment thinking and moral principles that made Canada a very successful nation, and a nation to be envied and to be immigrated to. But unfortunately, we're losing it.
Well, it sounds like the values that you're trying to preserve and defend are values that the major parties like the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, have abandoned.
Yes, we chose this location. It's Shuv Majumdar's, the Conservative candidate for Calgary Heritage, is behind me. This is his headquarters. I consider him the main opposition because people, Christian people in particular, think I have a duty to be on the winning side. I have a duty to cast a smart vote rather than a principled vote. So the idea is, well, I'll vote for the least of the evils, at least they'll get in, but a vote for principle, a vote for a Christian Heritage Party, they think is a losing vote. But I'll tell them the only losing vote is one that does not represent your convictions. You always leave the outcome of an election to God. You're not going to be the savior of a particular election with your one vote. You're not going to save Canada by compromising the principles that you hold dear to your heart.
Why are you here outside in front of the library today?
I'm here to express God's righteousness, His holiness, and His standards for children.
I've seen you very active. You're very active on the political front. You're out there in protest, protesting against drag queens, gender ideology. You're with the parents. You're out there. What is your stance on gender ideology?
Well, it's a Marxist tool to break down all moral restraints in a society. And you notice at the end of the alphabet people, there's this plus sign, and that means anything you want it to be, including identifying as a cat and needing a litter box in a elementary school or whatever. This is absolute madness, and it's a terrible violation of the criminal code of sexualization of children. It has to be stopped, and it has to be stopped in a very punitive way. It needs to be recriminalized. Anybody doing this to a young child needs to be in prison.
There was a news article that I read on CTV that where the NDP candidate for Calgary Heritage claimed that they were the only ones living in the riding.
Yes.
That turned out to be not true. Can you comment on that, please?
Yes, I believe the Maverick candidate and myself, I've lived in Calgary Heritage for 60 years, since 1963. So he made a statement, and maybe it was true of some of the main runners of the Liberal and the Conservative, but it's certainly not true of at least two of us who live in Calgary Heritage.
And you've been living there for approximately 60 years, is that correct?
60 years, yeah. I grew up in this area, so I know it very well. And I don't believe in the old Reform doctrine that I'll do whatever 51% of the people want me to do. That's idolatry. You don't vote down the 10 Commandments. If they say we want adultery, 51%, I'm not going to vote for adultery. I'm going to state my principles ahead of time and let people decide on that basis whether they want me representing them. I'm not some kind of prostituting shill that goes around looking for the direction of the wind and getting in front of a parade or anything like that.
What would it look like if you were to win the seat and you were to go to Ottawa? How would you represent the riding?
It would be amazing. We would have our first member of parliament for the Christian Heritage Party ever. It would cast light into a dark place, and we'd have to have a very strong ground game, because our next election could be within 2 years or less. So I have a strategy on the best, strongest ground game of constituency interaction in all of Canada. It would have to be strong to convince the people that they would put their trust in me for a full term.
Anything else you would like to add?
I would just say this idea of the inevitable, that wasting a so-called vote on a so-called fringe party is a waste of time. If, let's say, 2,000 people voted for me as a Christian Heritage Party, the Conservative Party would never be able to take those votes for granted again, and they would start paying attention to our issues. Right now, they say, oh, these Christians, they talk a big game, but when it comes to the election day, they cave in and they vote for me. And so I don't need to worry about their values after the election. We can change that by degree, or we can change it all of a sudden by putting a truly representative Christian-based value, Judeo-Christian, I should say, because it all started with the Old Testament 10 Commandments, not with just the New Testament.
I admire your dedication. I mean, you're an inspiration to independent candidates across Canada, across the world, I believe, because you literally caused Taylor Shandro, the former Justice Minister, to lose his seat. It was you did it, so I congratulate you on that, and I admire you on that. And thank you so much for your time and coming and explaining your position and sharing your campaign with our audience.
You're welcome, Mocha. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.